All right, let's talk about one of the biggest, most mind-bending cosmic mysteries of the 20th century. Back in 1908, something just appeared in the sky and then detonated over Siberia with a force it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. But here's the crazy part. What it left behind wasn't a smoking gun, it was a giant, baffling puzzle.
Get this, in a flash, an area of remote forest. We're talking nearly the size of a huge city was just gone, wiped out. An estimated 80 million trees were flattened. I mean, they were knocked over like they were nothing more than matchsticks, pushed down by some invisible, unbelievably powerful hand. The scale is just staggering.
And for the very few people who actually saw it happen, well, the only word for it is apocalyptic. I want you to just imagine this for a second. You look up, and the sky literally splits in two. And then this wave of fire just erupts high over the forest, bringing with it this intense, unbearable heat. This sounds like something out of a movie, but it's not. This is what real people, eyewitnesses, said they saw.
Okay, so let's set the scene properly. We're going back to June 30th, 1908. We're in a really remote, sparsely populated part of Siberia, right near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River. It's about, 7:17 in the morning, and for anyone within hundreds of kilometers, their world was about to change forever.
Now, to give you a sense of the power we're talking about here, scientists figure the energy released was just immense. Somewhere in the ballpark of 10 to 20 megatons of TNT. To put that in perspective, that's a blast up to 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And what's really wild is this happened decades before the atomic age even existed.
The accounts from people on the ground describe this absolutely terrifying sequence of events. First, they saw this brilliant blue light streaking across the morning sky. Then came a boom so deafening, so colossal, that the shock wave literally knocked people off their feet. It shattered windows hundreds of kilometers away. And get this, the pressure wave was so strong it was detected as it circled the entire globe. On top of all that, the heat was so intense it started fires in the forest and could even burn your skin if you were exposed.
Now you'd think an explosion that big, right? It's gotta leave a mark. A huge, colossal crater. But that's where things get weird. The search for that crater, well, that's what turns this from a catastrophe into one of the greatest mysteries of all time.
So you're probably thinking, hold on, an event this massive? Why weren't scientists all over it immediately? And that's a fair question. But you have to remember, this was Siberia in 1908. It was incredibly remote, almost impossible to get to. And then, before anyone could really mount a proper expedition, world history kind of got in the way. With things like World War I and the Russian Revolution. So the site just sat there, uninvestigated, for nearly 20 years.
And here's the absolute heart of the mystery. When the first scientific expedition finally made it there in 1927, they found exactly what you'd expect, utter, complete devastation. But they didn't find what they expected. The one thing that should have been there, the big smoking gun, the definitive proof of a meteorite strike, it was gone. It was missing. There was no impact crater.
So who's the first person to really tackle this puzzle head-on? A Soviet meteorologist named Leonid Kulik. This guy became completely obsessed with the Tunguska event. He led the very first expeditions into that devastated zone, and he was absolutely convinced he was going to find the culprit, a massive iron meteorite.
I mean, Kulik and his teams, they went through some seriously punishing conditions to survey and map this place. And what they uncovered was just this huge region of destruction, more than 830 square miles of it. But hidden in all that chaos was the very first major clue about what really happened.
And the clue was in the trees. See, they weren't just knocked down randomly. When they mapped it out, the fallen trees formed this gigantic, almost perfect butterfly shape. All the trees were pointing away from a central point, like spokes on a wheel. And that told them something absolutely crucial. The blast didn't come from a single point on the ground. It came from somewhere above.
And right at the dead center of that butterfly pattern, the scene got even stranger. Remember, no crater. Instead, Kulik found what he called a telegraph pole forest. A whole bunch of trees were still standing upright, but they'd been violently stripped of every single branch. All their bark just peeled away. They were scorched, for sure, but they were still standing. It was a bizarre, ghost-like landscape.
So let's recap. You've got this massive explosion, a forest of scorched tree trunks, but no crater. With evidence this weird, the door for speculation was just thrown wide open. The hunt for what caused Tunguska was officially on, and boy did it lead down some wild paths, both scientific and, well, not so scientific.
Okay, so in the scientific corner, you basically had two main suspects, a comet versus an asteroid. The comet theory made sense because a comet is mostly ice, right? It could have just completely vaporized in the atmosphere, leaving no crater. On the other hand, you have an asteroid, which is made of rock or iron. It's tougher. And even though they never found a big piece, some tiny fragments found decades later did suggest it might have been a stony asteroid. This debate went back and forth for years.
And with no clear answer, that's when the really bizarre theories started popping up. I mean, people proposed everything. A tiny black hole that just zipped right through the Earth? Sure. A massive eruption of natural gas? Maybe. An alien spacecraft crashing? Of course. Some people even pointed the finger at an experiment by Nikola Tesla, his death ray. It really shows you just how much of a mystery this was. People were grasping at anything for an explanation.
So for almost 100 years, Tunguska was just this huge, unsolved mystery. But then, fast forward to the 21st century. Suddenly, we have new technology and, as it turns out, new evidence from other events that finally gave scientists the tools they needed to pretty much crack the case.
Yeah, the road to an answer was a long one. You have Kulik's expedition way back in 1927, but the real game changer didn't happen until 2013, with the Chelyabinsk meteor in Russia. It was basically a mini Tunguska, but this time it was captured on thousands of dash cams and phones. For the first time, scientists had incredible data. By 2018, NASA could take all that new info, plug it into supercomputers, and finally build a model that explained Tunguska.
And here's what the models showed. The consensus today is pretty clear. The Tunguska event was caused by a stony asteroid, probably about 50 to 70 meters across. So not gigantic, but big enough. And here's the key. It never hit the ground. It blew up in the atmosphere about 6 to 8 miles up. The official term for this is an airburst.
So what exactly is an airburst? Well, think of an object screaming into our atmosphere at insane speeds. The pressure and heat become so immense that the object just shatters. It violently explodes, releasing all of its energy high above the ground. And this one idea, this airburst, perfectly explains everything. It explains the massive shockwave, the butterfly pattern of trees, and that weird telegraph pole forest in the middle. And most importantly, it explains why there was no crater.
And here's a really important takeaway from all this new research. Before, scientists figured an event this big might happen every few hundred years, but the new models suggest it's actually much rarer, more like once every 1,000 years or so. Now, that's definitely good news, but it doesn't mean we're totally off the hook. So, after more than 100 years, the case of the Great Siberian Fireball is pretty much closed. It wasn't aliens, it wasn't Tesla's death ray, it was a natural and frankly, terrifyingly powerful event. It's probably the most powerful reminder we have in all of modern history that our little planet is flying through, well, a cosmic shooting gallery. Think about it. We got incredibly lucky in 1908. That explosion happened over one of the most desolate, empty places on the entire planet. But it leaves us with a pretty chilling thought, doesn't it? The question isn't if another object that size will hit our atmosphere, it's when. And more importantly, where will it be aiming next time?